Israel has killed so many journalists, over 170 journalists, and now it's put out a hit piece on 6 other journalists that it wants to execute. Reports about the devastating effects of Israel's policy, anemia in pregnant women, people dying, not being able to access medical care. This was back in 2007. 44 activists from 17 different countries set sail from Cyprus to Gaza. 2008, we became the first boats to dock in Gaza without Israel's permission. Why are you abiding by these restrictions that are unlawful, that are tried a few months later to send another boat, and Israel commandeered that boat, took everybody hostage? 2010, we built a flotilla. So more groups joined us from around the world. 700 people, 7 ships loaded with 10,000 tons of aid that set sail for Gaza. And in May 30th, 2010, Israel lethally attacked our flotilla and killed 9 of our colleagues instantly. In April of 2024, hundreds of people answered our call to come to Istanbul, where we had 3 large ships ready to sail. One of them was loaded with 55 tons of life-saving aid. Over 100 journalists also, because we wanted to break the siege, bring in life-saving aid, but we were never about just being an aid mission. Palestine is not a humanitarian aid crisis, and we cannot sail because now the government of Turkey is not letting our boats go.
Hello and welcome to episode 133 of the Palestine Pod, the weekly podcast where we break down the latest headlines dealing with Palestine from all over the world and bring you stories, commentary, and interviews with the aim of supporting the Palestinian struggle for decolonization, justice, and equal rights. I'm one of your hosts, Lara E. You might know me from Instagram as @GazanGirl, and I'm joined by my co-host, Mikey B.
What's up, y'all? Mikey B on TikTok, Michael Schertzer on Instagram, and you can call me Mikey Intifada if you are one of the terrorists who was in the mess hall when it got messy.
I don't know what that's a reference to, but...
Oh, it's a reference to when Hezbollah sent a drone into the army base in occupied Palestine and blew up a bunch of people who were eating together. And then, as Ali Mortada said, why are you eating together? It's a war.
Today's guest is Huwaida Arraf. She's the co-founder of the International Solidarity Movement, the founder of the Free Gaza Flotilla movement as well, and international human rights attorney. Huwaida, welcome to the Palestine Pod.
Thank you. It's good to be with you. Finally, I've been listening to your show, love your show, and finally get to be a guest on your show. Thank you.
Thank you so much for saying that and for being here. So let's get started with the flotilla. You're obviously one of the co-founders of the International Solidarity Movement, who's been very active in direct action and activism efforts to support the Palestinian people in their liberation struggle. And one of your latest efforts has been an attempt to bring a flotilla from Turkey to Gaza to break the siege. And I understand that the flotilla has not been able to do so. So for our listeners, could you just share a little bit more about what the flotilla is, why a flotilla to Gaza, what's the purpose of it, and what's holding it up?
Yeah, sure. So the effort to break the siege on Gaza via the sea started it started back in 2006, 2007, when members of the International Solidarity Movement these are people from different countries who had volunteered in the occupied Palestinian territory, knew what was happening, and were frustrated that we did not have access to Gaza. Israel had completely sealed it off and claimed that it was for security purposes. But we knew that it was not, obviously, for security purposes, and Israel was denying basic things from getting to the people of Gaza. We had United Nations and other humanitarian organizations writing reports about the devastating effects of Israel's policy, including anemia in pregnant women, stunted growth in children, and people dying, not being able to access medical care. This was back in 2007, and nobody was doing anything about it. And so one volunteer had the idea that why don't we try to sail a boat to Gaza, which seemed really ludicrous. Actually, we didn't even have a boat or know anything about boats. But when we saw that nothing else was being done, nothing seemed really to address the moment, we thought we have to try whatever we can. And so a group of activists who were originally members of the International Solidarity Movement, but ended up breaking off and becoming what we called the Free Gaza movement, in the summer of 2008, managed to get 2 small fishing boats, converted fishing boats, and We were 44 activists from 17 different countries, and we were going to set sail from Cyprus to Gaza. And the goal was to expose to the world that Israel's policy is not about security. Israel's policy is about punishing the people of Gaza. This is a crime. This is a war crime. The world needs to rise up against it. Now, actually, when I look back and see the extent of what Israel has done, and with impunity, it's really devastating, because back then in 2008, we thought, no way we're actually going to make it to Gaza. But if Israel is going to prevent us, then they have to confront us at tea. They're going to stop us, and they're going to expose to the world that their policy is not about security, because we are 44 peace activists. We constitute no threat to the state of Israel. And this is a policy of punishment, and the world has to rise up against it. And so we set sail with Israel issuing all kinds of threats that we were not going to make it through. But at the last minute, we were in the middle of the sea, and we got word that Israel just announced it wasn't going to intercept our ships. And in the summer of 2008, it was August of 2008, we became the first boats to dock in Gaza without Israel's permission in over 40 years. And it was incredible for me to see tens of thousands of Palestinians in Gaza who are being persecuted by this state that is supported by the countries that we were coming from. We are mainly from the United States and Europe. Palestinians received us so warmly. Literally tens of thousands came to the port and just cheering and hugging and thanking us that we had broken the siege. And we knew that we hadn't broken the siege. We had to keep doing this. We had to encourage other people to do it also, and really create a seaway access for Gaza to the outside world. And we vowed that we would keep doing it. And we did. A few days later, we sailed out of Gaza, and we took with us 7 people from Gaza that Israel was preventing from leaving. We left some internationals in Gaza to work with the people there. And we took out a young boy, 16 years old, who had had his leg amputated from the hip. And Israel wasn't letting him out to get a prosthetic leg. So him and his father in his wheelchair, we put it on our boats. And also a family, a woman and her 4 children, who had come to visit family in Gaza 2 years prior. And Israel had not let them out to go back home to Europe. And so we put them on our boat and sailed out without Israel's permission. That was the first time that was done also. And so we were optimistic then that we would be able to do something, that we would be able to encourage maybe countries to come with us, the UN to defy Israel's bans on. When we were in Gaza, the UN told us Israel was not letting them bring in paper for their schools, pencils for their schools. And we said, all right, well, put them on a boat and come with us. Why are you abiding by these restrictions that are unlawful, that are meant to persecute the people of Gaza? But we remained doing it alone, managed to get into Gaza 4 more times before Israel launched Operation Cast Light in December of 2008. We tried to send 2 emergency boats during that time. Israel hit them both, almost capsized them. But we tried a few months later to send another boat, and Israel commandeered that boat, basically pirated it and took everybody hostage. We weren't able to get in anymore in the ways that we were. And so we were confronted with the choice of either abandoning this policy or escalating, and we decided to escalate. And in 2010, we built a flotilla. So more groups joined us from around the world. Actually, we had many different groups from around the world. We had 700 people. We had 7 ships loaded with 10,000 tons of aid that set sail for Gaza. And on the night of, in May 30th, 2010, Israel lethally attacked our flotilla and killed 9 of our colleagues instantly. And another colleague lay in coma for 4 months, and then he died. And of course, we didn't get in. There was really no accountability. There was some outrage expressed, but Israel was never held accountable. And this time after time that Israel has enjoyed impunity is really what has led us to where we are today, where Israel feels that it can just not only commit genocide, but brag about it really on social media, and they will face no repercussions, because that is what the world has accustomed them to. But the attack in 2010 did not stop the effort. And ever since then, we have been trying to sail boats. We haven't managed to get in then, but certainly we haven't stopped. And when the genocide started, we got together and decided that we have to do another big flotilla, and we have to take in as much aid as we can, even though people knew that not only has Israel killed our colleagues before, but now is more brutal than ever with total impunity. In April of 2024, hundreds of people answered our call to come to Istanbul, where we had 3 large ships ready to sail. One of them was loaded with 55 tons of life-saving aid. So we had 3 large ships, hundreds of people, over 100 journalists also, because we wanted to break the siege, bring in life-saving aid, but we were never about just being an aid mission, right? Because Palestine is not a humanitarian aid crisis. It is a political crisis that needs to be directly challenged, and nobody is doing that. Unfortunately, we were sabotaged in April in that the night before we were supposed to sail, the flags from 2 of our ships were pulled. The country that flagged our ships pulled it, and we were not able to resolve it in a short period of time. So we had to send people home, promising that we would call them back as soon as we managed to get another flag. It took us a while, but we have our ships flagged again. However, we still cannot sail. And we can't sail now because the government of Turkey is holding our ships hostage. They will not let us go. And we have had our colleagues and the people of Turkey keeping vigil and protesting at the port for the last month, day and night, demanding that our boats be released so we can sail. It is the government of Turkey that is right now holding us up, despite Erdogan's proclamations in support of Palestine. His government is not letting these boats carrying life-saving aid. And we know now at the north of Gaza, but throughout Gaza, people are starving. Our boats are filled not only with food, but with medicines that people of Gaza desperately need. And more importantly, journalists and hundreds of civilians are willing to directly challenge, to defy Israel's illegal, unlawful siege on an entire civilian population. But that's the situation. The government of Turkey is not letting us go. These governments are all complicit. You don't have to be supplying weapons to Israel to be complicit in this genocide. You have been complicit in maintaining the siege because you're abiding by it. Israel is doing something wrong, so defy it. If some people have claimed, well, maybe the government of Turkey, maybe they're just worried that Israel will kill you. Well, you're worried about us, come with us then. We should have flotillas. We should have hundreds of ships going because we see what's happening. We know it's wrong, but all of these countries are letting it happen. They should be doing what we're trying to do. Not only are they not doing it, but they're actively stopping us from doing it.
Yeah, when I first heard about the most recent flotilla, I was actually invited on it to come with, and it was an honor. I truly did. But I was so concerned because I remember the last flotilla was shot down, like people were murdered. And so I was like, hey, are there any precautions like security? Do we have guns like that? And the person I was in contact with was like, no, I didn't foresee anything different happening. Like I thought that they would shoot the ship down again, but they just went through like a procedural measure of stopping the ship.
Yeah, it is this bureaucratic sabotage now. It's true. We weren't able to guarantee anybody's safety, but we tried to do everything that we could, short of being, armed, of course, which wouldn't help us anyway, because Israel has more arms than we do. But anyway, we are part of a civilian global nonviolent initiatives, right? So what are some of the measures that we took? Having journalists on board, we equipped the ships with communications capabilities. So if Israel even tried to jam one line, we would be able to kind of circumvent that and maintain communication so we could live stream from the middle of the sea whatever was happening to us. We alerted governments that, and we're very open about that this is what we're doing, and Israel knows that we're coming. Israel knows that we are civilians carrying aid. And so if it attacks us, it's a deliberate attack on civilians. And we asked our governments and people in countries to put pressure on governments to tell Israel to guarantee us safe passage. It was heartening and humbling to be with so many people who were willing to take that chance, not wanting to be heroes, not saying I'm not scared or, I'm going to be a hero or I'm any kind of savior, but willing to say that not doing anything is even scarier for me. It's even more dangerous for me. And for me personally, it was hard for me. I have 2 young kids at home. My daughter one night broke out crying when she had learned that Israel had violently attacked our ships before, and she did not want to let me go at the airport. And I was trying to promise that I would, Mama would be coming back. But I really didn't know, if I could keep that promise. But again, it was more important to me that I do everything I can not to pass on to her and to her brother and to future generations a world where this could happen, where we could see the atrocities being committed, a live stream genocide, and we are not able to stop it. We are not doing as much as we can to stop it. And when I was in Istanbul, my husband called me to tell me that my daughter actually asked him, her question was, Baba, if Mama gets killed, should I not be sad because she was killed trying to help people? I don't know, how I feel her age, at the age of 9, she should be thinking like that. And obviously my mind goes to all of the children in Gaza and what they are not only saying and feeling, but what they're seeing every single day. The trauma on our children is just so hard to fathom. It's really hard to fathom the reality that we're living in.
I remember when Israel attacked the Mavi Marmara in international waters and killed 10 people. I was in law school when that happened. And I thought to myself, surely this time there's going to be accountability. Surely we're not going to let them get away with attacking a boat filled with humanitarian aid to break an illegal siege where people need food and medicine and basic supplies. At one point, I will never forget Amira Hass's article in Haaretz when she wrote at the beginning of Israel's siege, sometime in 2007, maybe, about how Israel was preventing potato chips and chocolate from entering Gaza and cooking oil on the guise of this being for its security needs. And I remember thinking to myself just how absurd the whole thing was, and that surely, civilized and educated people are not going to fall with this, and that this siege is not going to last. And every time Israel broke another international norm, committed another massacre, I kept having the same thought, after every single time that it mowed the lawn in Gaza. I said, no, this time things will change. And I find myself having this thought less and less, and now adopting a worldview that actually there is no crime that they could commit that will be too much, because the Western world and the powers that be and the mainstream media have already accepted the premise of Palestinian death as inevitable, as necessary, as moral, right? And it's essentially contained in everything that they say and do, right? That's the underlying assumption. So when we see that CNN article from a couple of days ago trying to promote sympathy for an Israeli occupation soldier who committed genocide in Gaza for months, and it's a sympathy piece over him taking his own life and, trying to trigger the emotions of readers. And buried deep in the article is the fact that he ran over hundreds of Palestinians, dead and alive, until their brains seeped out of their heads in a bulldozer, in a tractor, in a tank, whatever it was. And the only trigger warning on the article was that this article discusses suicide, right? So Palestinian killing, even in the most grotesque form, is not even something that is supposed to shock the conscience, according to the mainstream media. And so this is what the Western world has accepted as a premise. And anybody who challenges this premise is persona non grata, is to be excluded from society, from these societies in any event. Of course, we know that the rest of the world doesn't think this way. Of course, we know that the majority of the world is on our side, but that the places where many of us live and the governments with the most power in this moment are adopting or have adopted a framework where our extermination, our annihilation, our ethnic cleansing is accepted. And they allow the perpetrators of these crimes, as you said, to brag about them brazenly, openly. What did I see? The official Mossad account tweet maybe 2 days ago, as they were collecting thousands of Palestinians from Jabalia and forcing them out into a death march after they've been starved for 20 days because no food has entered the northern part of Gaza for 20 days because of Israel's siege and implementation of the so-called general's plan, right? The plan to starve northern Gaza so that the hundreds of thousands of people who remained steadfast in their homes after 1 year of genocide, that they be expelled out because their crime was to remain in their homes. What did they tweet? They tweeted, this is the last time that Gazans will see Jabalia, right? They're proud of the Nakba that they're committing, and they know that they won't be held accountable. And so that's realization that I think is difficult to come to, because if you come from a background like ours, like we studied law, so, we feel that, well, I mean, at least we're told that at some point, with enough violations, the world will hold you to account. The mechanisms will start to, work. It won't happen every time. We know that enforcement mechanisms are weak in international law, but at some point, the institutions and the frameworks have to kick in. And so far, they haven't. They haven't changed the material reality of life on the ground for Palestinians, even though we've had wins, even though we've had many legal wins, one would say, in the last year. So that's been really hard. And I just wonder, how do you deal with that? How do you deal with that sort of realization that nothing, no massacre is going to be the one that stops this?
Yeah, it is a tough realization, because when I was living in the occupied Palestinian territory and organizing with the International Solidarity Movement, the idea was, or the belief was, that we just had to expose more what was happening. People didn't know enough. And at the time, Israel was gradually raising the ceiling of the things that it could do. It would do something outrageous, it would get away with it. Then the next time we'd do something more outrageous. But we still thought there is some red line. It can't bring in buses to carry people and throw them over the border. It cannot massively, exterminate a whole village. Or there were some red lines, and as you said, we're coming to see that there aren't any, and that has just been built over time. I think Israel knows this as I don't want to say necessarily desensitize the world to it, but each time they commit a crime, give it a little bit of time, nothing is done. The next time it's even more extreme. And now, like with the hospitals, right? When they first bombed the Al hospital, like no way Israel would never bomb a hospital, and all these lies back and forth. And now they bombed and destroyed every hospital in Gaza. With those of us who have studied the law, I think, like me, you probably also realize that law is obviously not our savior. It's just a tool. But when you can't get that tool to work, it's also kind of frustrating, but not in a way that we give up on it, right? I think it's important to keep stressing, like the wins that we've had, that Israel is plausibly committing genocide. The United States continues to enable Israel, continues to send weapons, even though it is on notice that Israel is plausibly committing a genocide. This makes the United States complicit. What can we do with that? I think one of the things that has happened is that a lot of the world has woken up. A lot of Americans have even woken up to what US policy really is, what Israel really is. And a lot of us believe that there is no going back, but none of that horror, none of that, the organizing that we're doing, kind of using the law to educate, is going to stop the genocide now. And that's not to say that we should just reconcile ourselves with all these people are just going to die. This is what I'm asking myself every day. You take is there something else I could do? The fact that we're not acting now is like another person, another 10 people, another 100 people. The world system, this is a problem with this kind of rules-based order where might makes right, and where the powerful countries and these countries that are horrible, violent colonial past and present get to dictate whose lives are worth saving and where the law applies and where it doesn't apply. But this is not, like you said, what the majority of the world thinks. But how do we organize and continue to organize effectively to change that system? And you said, I think implementation of the law is all political will. So it comes down to what kind of political organizing are we also doing? Who are these people who we are electing? And, not only at the top, at every level of society, where are our people and what are we doing? And I think that, as an American citizen, it's been something I've said for a long time as a Palestinian-American. We've been in this country for decades, and we have done and given a lot to support Palestine and the steadfastness of our people in Palestine. But a lot of it has been in the form of humanitarian aid and not enough political organizing to change the realities, to change the politics that leave our people in need of aid. And there has been a waking up to that, and there has been more work along those lines. How much more it's going to take, I don't know. But I know that we don't have an option except that we have to keep doing it. And knowing that, I used to say the world is doing nothing. That's not really true. The world is actually mobilizing. Millions, if not billions of people are mobilizing. We just haven't managed to get the powers that be to do the right thing. And we need to work there more.
Yeah. When you grow up Jewish in the United States, you're trained to recognize fascism, and then they never expected that we would recognize it in our own community. That said, you were talking a lot about like the failures of international law and how law is a tool, but the tool's not working that well, and a commitment to nonviolence. I want to know if you still feel that commitment or if you believe that tactics should evolve.
Well, I believe that we need to use all kinds of tactics. When I was talking about the international solidarity movement and the Free Gaza movement, or the Freedom Flotilla coalition, this is using the power of international society. This is deciding that this is the way that we can mobilize nonviolently because it's our strength, not because the armed resistance is wrong or anything like that. I also don't condemn people who are in a struggle for liberation to do that when the entire system in the world has failed them. I think that different kinds of tactics, and yes, law is a tool, nonviolent direct action is a tool, using your voice in the media and education, these are all tools, political organizing, these are all tools, and I think that they all need to be used. But one thing for the international solidarity movement, while we always stressed we only use nonviolent direct action means, we did not say, come out and say armed resistance is wrong. In fact, we recognize that an occupied, colonized people have a right enshrined in international law to resist, to use armed struggle towards liberation. That's not, us trying to say ours is a better way or anything, but ours is the tactic that we use, are a way.
Actually, really appreciate that answer. That is enlightening as to like your position entirely. And I just wanted to read a quote from a book that I just recently finished by Robert Williams. It's called Negroes with Guns. Because there has been so much distortion of my position, I wish to make it clear that I do not advocate violence for its own sake or for the sake of reprisals against whites, nor am I against the passive resistance advocated by Reverend Martin Luther King and others. My only difference with Dr. King is that I believe in flexibility in the freedom struggle. This means that I believe in nonviolent tactics where feasible. Massive civil disobedience is a powerful weapon under civilized conditions, where the law safeguards the citizens' right to peaceful demonstrations. In civilized society, the law serves as a deterrent against lawless forces that would destroy the democratic process. But where there is a breakdown of the law, the individual citizen has a right to protect his person, his family, his home, and his property. To me, this is so simple and proper that it is self-evident. When an oppressed people show a willingness to defend themselves, the enemy, who is a moral weakling and a coward, is more willing to grant concessions and work for a respectable compromise. Psychologically, moreover, racists consider themselves superior beings, and they are not willing to exchange their lives, superior lives, for the inferior ones. They are most vicious and violent when they can practice violence with impunity.
Yeah, it sounds A lot like what we're seeing today. And the impunity point is a big one because there is such a trend of seeing them test the waters with a particular crime and see that, namely, the US has allowed that to go on and then go full force with that crime, right? You know, as we're recording this, Kamal Adwan Hospital in the northern part of Gaza has been facing shelling, bombing, sniper fire, while a number of patients are still inside the hospital and have been besieged inside the hospital for weeks now. The Palestinian Civil Defense announced a couple of days ago that they can no longer try to rescue people in the northern part of Gaza because of the sheer amount of attacks that they've been facing at the hands of the Israeli occupation forces. Israel put out a hit piece for some of the last remaining journalists in the northern part of Gaza that are witnessing and showing the world their crimes and maintaining the record. We've been hearing horrific testimonies of things that I couldn't even imagine, of mothers being put into pits, being separated from their children, children being thrown into the pits with the mothers, not even the mother with her own child. Seen images, even images that the Israeli occupation forces themselves have published, of thousands of Palestinians being forced out of the northern part of Gaza, a Nakba in real time. We've seen them expand the Nakba also into Lebanon in the last several weeks. And Lebanon, too, is now facing the same attacks on healthcare facilities and hospitals and bombardment that was tried and tested in Gaza with full impunity. And so now the attacks are on the Lebanese hospitals. The same excuses are offered in the media with no scrutiny by the journalists who regurgitate them. But I think it's important just to make the point that it's all based on lies. For those of us who are still reading UN reports, there's an interesting report that you should all read. It's the latest report of the UN Commission of Inquiry, which has concluded that Israel is committing the crime against humanity of extermination, as well as a number of other war crimes. And with respect to the crime against humanity of extermination, the report lays out in detail the sustained campaign of attacks against hospitals in Gaza that we have seen for the last year in this genocide. Hospitals against patients, against displaced people, against healthcare workers, the abduction and torturing of healthcare workers, the killing of doctors, including heads of departments of Gazan hospitals in torture facilities as well. And pages and pages and pages of evidence. Of course, if you read this report and you've been following everything that's been happening in Gaza, you're reading the things that you've seen, right? So all of it should be very familiar to you if you've been paying attention. But one thing that is striking is you'll come across one paragraph which says that Israel, of course, accuses Hamas of firing from hospitals. And so this is the pretext for why these hospitals must be targeted. And there's one sentence which says Israel has provided no evidence to the commission. No evidence, not a single piece of evidence to corroborate this claim. So this is a claim which has been paraded out on every single mainstream media platform. They repeat it over and over and over again. The so-called journalists on these platforms have no issue stating it as if it's fact. And not once has anyone stopped to say, do you have any evidence for this claim? And when the Commission of Inquiry goes to investigate these matters, it's essentially where you should be providing the evidence, if any evidence exists. Israel provides no evidence, none whatsoever, not a single shred of evidence. And the report gets published like this. And, you know, it's like if somebody was at least trying, but they don't even feel that they have to try, right? They don't have to try. They can just say it and never, ever, ever substantiate it. And it still gets repeated as if it's fact. And this is enough to make anyone go mad. You're being perpetually gaslit about things which are not true, that they have never provided evidence for.
And it's things that they've done to Palestinians.
The same goes for the tired line of human shields, when now we're seeing mainstream media wake up to the fact that no, actually it's Israel which is using Palestinians as human shields, when in fact this is not news to any Palestinian. This is not news to anybody who's even following this issue from the perspective of the UN reports, because this has been known in the UN world for ages. It's even been known in Israeli society for ages, because Israeli Supreme Court has already ruled on the issue, saying you can't really use Palestinians as human shields. You guys are going to have to stop, right? But it's just this like maintenance of a double discourse. The truth is there also, if you're interested, but both discourses exist at once in the public space, and you find yourself constantly having to dispel the myths, and we're dispelling the same myths we've been dispelling for 20 years.
Just complicity of the mainstream corporate media in how they are reporting on what they're choosing to report, and even if they report on an incident, how they report on it. Like, for example, and the fact that the media, that Israel has killed so many journalists, over 170 journalists, and now it's put out a hit piece on 6 other journalists that it wants to execute. Like, this is a prelude to their assassination. And like you said, with no evidence, these are bogus claims. In July, they killed, right, Ismail al-Ghul, claiming that he was a Hamas operative. But the evidence that they provided is outrageous. They claim that he had gotten some kind of military ranking in 2007. And he was born in 1997. So he would have been 10 and getting a military ranking according to their evidence. It's bogus evidence. It's not there, but they know that they just have to say it. The US administration will back them up on it, and the mainstream corporate media is just going to also parrot it. When we see interviews being done, right, on CNN and NBC and all of these mainstream channels, like, those doing the interviews are doing Israel's work for them, right? And it's not trying to get to the truth. It is always presenting and pushing Israel's side of the story. And, at best, you're kind of muddying the waters instead of actually just presenting what is happening. And on another level, the fact that these journalists really around the world, but Western journalists specifically, have not just silent while their colleagues are being executed, right? So that is just entirely shameful. And not only you have Western journalists, but also the doctors. You have the American Medical Association. I mean, you have doctors going and trying to help, but you have the largest American, medical association that is seeing and hearing what their own doctors or their own members are saying, and still not speaking up, not saying anything, not speaking up against genocide. It is absolutely shameful. I mean, it's being, I think, exposed, like you said, because we have so many other methods of communicating now. They think we're stupid. People are not stupid, right? We see what's happening. These institutions, the governments, the politicians, are being exposed, but none of that, again, is stopping the slaughter now, right? And I think that we have to continue to try, of course, but not give up on it. We can't stop it now. That everything else that we're doing, that one day these people, maybe not everybody, but they will be prosecuted. They will be shunned. They will be shamed. All of the media who were complicit, they will be shamed. I don't remember who it was. Maybe Craig Mukhaibar, who wrote a great piece actually on the complicity of Western corporate media. I don't remember if it was him though, or somebody else that said, and when the Palestinian Holocaust or Genocide Museum is erected, there will be a whole wing for all of these journalists that participated, that were complicit in this genocide. One day the world will know, and there will be great shame. It's not saving kids now, and the devastation is unimaginable. Again, we go back to, we just have to keep doing what you're doing in educating, lawyers using what they have at their disposal. We have the South Africa case. We have lawyers in all kinds of different countries using like universal jurisdiction laws and other to file cases in different European courts. In the United States, obviously, we tried U.S. law, and this is terrible. I was actually a plaintiff in a case on the attack on the flotilla in 2010. We filed a lawsuit against the state of Israel. the US always intervenes to say this is a political question. And even though the ship that I was on in 2010, I wasn't on the Mavi Marmara, I was on a US flagged ship. Israel attacked the US flagged ship and beat and tortured US citizens on a US flagged ship. And still the United States government intervened to say that the court should stay out of this. This is a political question, giving Israel immunity again. But even using US courts, we're not we're not stopping. We have to continue to look to different avenues for accountability, and that so many people are now awakened is it is hope that that will happen. It's going to happen. These people that are committing these crimes now are not going to get away with it. And one thing that I say, I mean, even if it's just in legacy. We know Biden's legacy in genocide, but that's not enough. Like my kids and their kids will not let Biden's grandkids and great grandkids live down that their father participated in the genocide of the Palestinian people.
Yeah. And when that museum is built, I'm going to lock Anderson Cooper to a chain myself. Also, I don't know if you guys caught this, but there was a Fox News journalist who did an expose on Israel killing journalists. He was like, look, I don't take a lot of like positions in the things that I cover, but they need to stop killing journalists. And so I was surprised that that had infiltrated even Fox News, because you can't even find that on MSNBC, the supposed democratic, like morally superior network, you know?
Right. Wow, I missed that piece.
Not that I'm big Fox News, by the way. I just want to make that clear.
No, but sometimes you can find some gems.
I want to just pick up on one thing that you said, which was that they're not going to get away with this. And I have felt that very deeply in my heart now, because I deeply believe that you cannot put out this level of injustice in the world and that it doesn't come back to haunt you in one way or another. Justice will be had in one way or another. And, it may be that just a form of justice before courts, it may be in some cases, or it may be a different kind of justice. When I read the story about the occupation soldier who had taken his life.
Yeah, and if you are an occupation soldier who is struggling with the things that you've done, just recognize you don't have to. You could dip today.
You're talking about, I mean, even Israeli society, you're putting out this much injustice, like evil into the world. It's really hard to comprehend it. If you guys surely saw like the interview with that young woman who was coming out of the conference on resettling Gaza, just blatantly saying, kill them all. I think we should kill every last person in Gaza. Like what can make a person think like that? I mean, the psychology and what that even means for the future of a society that thinks and acts in this way.
Nazism. The idea that you could say kill them all to a group of people is Nazism. And I don't think anybody else would have trouble noticing that if the victims weren't Palestinian.
Right. That's interesting because for the longest time, I even avoided like genocide or comparisons to the Holocaust or Nazism. And when I was in Palestine in 2002, seeing what Israeli soldiers were doing to Palestinians, rounding them up, putting numbers, on their hands, at tying men up in a school courtyard, again, numbering them off and other things. I'm like, this is akin to what like Nazis did, but not outright using those comparisons, knowing that they were kind of sensitive and
fuck them.
But now I'm like,
Palestinians have censored the analysis for so long because we were afraid of hurting the feelings of the people exterminating us. And that needs to end. That needs to end. It's not about their feelings. It's about our annihilation in this moment. People are being numbered in this moment. People are being thrown into pits, blindfolded with zip ties.
Over 55 scholars of the Holocaust and over 800 scholars of genocide have said it is both like the Holocaust and a genocide. So we're in good company. Who do they have? Fucking Amy Schumer?
actually, one more quick point on that. I don't know if it makes the cut or not, but I was listening to Asad Abu Khalil talking on this very point the other day, and he said also he, for himself, the longest time, like didn't make comparisons to the Holocaust out of actually respect to the memory of those who perished in the Holocaust, not wanting to make comparisons, but now out of respect to the victims of the Holocaust, it's important to make those comparisons.
Yes. That's the point that I was going to make. I have family who was killed in the Holocaust, and that's why I make the comparison.
So, to the soldier who killed himself, I wrote, and others like him who have committed genocide in Gaza, your crimes will haunt each and every single one of you. This is obvious. The human being was created dignified by God. And no matter how much you try to convince yourself that we are animals and that it's moral for you to steal and settle our land, starve us, and kill us in mass, this offends the dignity that we were all born with. And your deepest, most inner self will not allow you to get away with it. You are your own worst enemies for denying our humanity. This is also why, no matter how miserable the Palestinian reality is, we deep down have peace of heart, knowing that our cause, freedom and human rights, is just, and that God loves justice and hates oppression. God does not favor one people over another. God judges us on the basis of our deeds. No one is better than anyone except in deeds. It's so simple. Colonizers will never have peace of mind. Never. Read Fanon, you are your own worst enemies. I really believe that. They are going to be tortured until the end of their existence.
I hope so.
And whether justice comes in the form of, courts or shaming, or, if you believe in the afterlife, or the torture that they feel every single day until they die, there will be justice in one way or another, because you can't get away with that. The world cannot work in this way to allow these types of crimes to just exist without the inevitable reverberation of everything that they put out in the world coming back for them.
I really want to believe that, but a counterpoint is Dick Cheney, who apparently Democrats love now. Big Dick Cheney fans.
I don't know if you saw, but some person trolled Kamala's team and was like, okay, I'll volunteer with you guys. And they had asked all the new volunteers, why are you excited to vote for her? And the troll was like, I'm really excited to vote for her because Dick Cheney endorsed her and I'm a big Dick Cheney fan. And they were like, yes, that's amazing. And the volunteer was like, they didn't get it was a troll.
Oh, they didn't get it was a joke, so it was like one of the jokes on this podcast.
Yeah. It doesn't mean anything to be a Democrat. It doesn't mean anything.
It actually just means that you're stupid. You're gullible. That's what it means.
Well, if Republicans, war criminals, are endorsing Democrats, what does it mean to be a Democrat? It doesn't mean anything.
So the social issues that they claim to, they're like, oh, Kamala will be better for trans people. But she just had an interview where she was like, I want states to follow the law. Basically, it was she wouldn't say that she supports trans rights. She was just like, I drive a Trans Am. What do y'all want from me? People are like, oh, it's easier to organize under Kamala. It's easier to organize under Democrats. And let me tell you, as somebody who is organizing for the last 8 years, that's not true. Okay? That is not true. It's easier, actually, when the Democrats oppose the policies that they support under Democratic operatives.
Yeah, Democrats become complacent. Just reaffirming that Democrats become complacent when they are in power. I was active in my local Democratic, because I ran for office as a Democrat a couple of years ago. I was active in my local Democratic groups. And last year in the fall of 2023, I'm like, look, guys, we got to put out a statement. We got to oppose what Biden is doing and U.S. weapons being sent. This is a genocide. And they're like, oh, we shouldn't comment on these issues. Oh, this is not our area. I'm like, you think you're going to get people to vote for you next year, come election time? If you are silent on genocide, you are showing all these people that you actually have no moral courage and you don't deserve to be in power. And so, anyway, all of that to say that they don't want to oppose what the administration is doing. So they become very complacent. And yeah, it's not easier to organize. Actually, we saw the explosion of organization and cross movement building during Trump's presidency. I'm just not saying, obviously, that I want Trump to be president. I mean, he doesn't deserve it. He's a horrible man. We don't know what he's going to do, but that doesn't mean I give my vote to a genocide enabler either.
When Trump was in office, you had the liberals who are now cheerleading these genocidal policies, at least pretending to oppose them because it wasn't their guy or their girl doing it. It was actually easier to organize when it was a Republican administration, because at least the people who are now blocking us from even talking about Palestine were pretending to be on our side.
Yeah, they have been actually very vicious this past year. A brief example, we know that they didn't give a Palestinian speaker, right? Even 2 minutes at the Democratic National Convention. But so I come home, I was at Democratic National Convention. I come home the next day, I'm at the Michigan Democratic Party convention because the students nominated me to run for office as the University of Michigan regent. Democrats are always talking about mobilizing the base and getting lots of young people and bringing new blood into the party. These students, when they asked me to run and mobilize for me to run, signed up 2,000 new members to the Michigan Democratic Party in 2 days. They should have been happy. They should have been like, wow, all this young energy in our party. But they treat us so terribly and did some shady things in the counting of the votes. 2.5 hours after an electronic vote ended, they were backstage doing something. They wouldn't let anyone from my campaign see what they were doing. And then they called the police in, over a dozen, maybe 15, 20 police officers before they come out to announce that I lost, even though I had overwhelming majority of people there to vote. But just the way they treated us, not letting us observe what they were doing, the counting, bringing in the police, and actually giving some of our voters who were visibly, Huwaida supporters, wrong voting information. You want us to dislike you, but so all of this energy that they could have had, now they're all nervous about potentially losing Michigan. I'm sorry, you deserve to lose Michigan. You deserve to lose, and you're not going to shame us or to scare us into voting for you. And it's sad. I go back to them, and these students, like I said, in 2 days mobilized 2,000 new members to the party and are phenomenal. You could have had that energy. Now, none of them are voting for the Democratic Party.
Dems, they're always like, oh, we have to energize the base. But what they are talking about is Al Qaeda, actually. And that's a joke in Arabic. Thank you so much.
Nothing screams democracy like a rigged, weird, non-transparent vote situation where they call the police on you and they don't let you see how the votes are tallied, and then they give all your supporters the wrong voting information so they can't go vote. I mean, I can think of a few things, but no, that just seems, highly democratic to me.
I don't know about you, but I always vote the same way as the Insane Clown Posse.
Whatever the result is, if they lose, they deserve the loss. They deserve the loss, every last bit of it. This is how mafias move. This is not how political parties in a so-called democratic system move. And when you say that you told them, let's work this out because we're trying to just find out, what the real result is here, I think your mistake is assuming that they care about the real result because it doesn't seem like that's on the top of their priorities.
I don't think it's like the mafia because the mafia has honor.
Yeah, true. It actually isn't like the mafia. I don't know. Again, I don't know what am I thinking of? Who are gangsters that don't abide by rules? I mean, you're right. The mafia have rules. Like,
oh, gangsters who don't apply, that's Zionist.
Look, I wish you all the best in that lawsuit, and I hope that I think it's important for us to be, to pursue justice, even if we're taking on a beast like the Democratic Party. It's really important for us to not just lay down and surrender. And like you said, like we have to do everything all the time. We can't surrender. Even if we're not stopping it today, we cannot give up in anything. You and I are both involved in a number of ad hoc groups that are working on justice and accountability initiatives that are literally going to shape the rest of our lives. Like this work is never going to end. Like we are going to pursue this until we die. And then our children are going to pursue this. There's no statute of limitations on genocide or crimes against humanity. And we will never, ever let go. So no surrender, not giving up, and we'll literally make this our life mission for so many Palestinians worldwide and allies to see to it that justice is had to the extent possible in this life. Turning to the question of dehumanization, I think it's been really difficult as Palestinians to see the level of dehumanization, which of course is the way that genocide works. You dehumanize a people in order to manufacture consent for their annihilation. And in this case, when the annihilation is live streamed, this dehumanization is necessary because it allows people to turn off the empathy when they see Palestinians being killed, when they see Palestinian children being killed and burnt. The thought is not offensive to them, it is that, no, this is good, this should happen, right? And we saw that in those Zionist Telegram groups where they were celebrating brutal things happening to children. And that dehumanization takes a toll on all of us, on any Palestinian worldwide. Of course, first and foremost in Gaza, because they're feeling it on their body, but to Palestinians all throughout the land and also in enforced exile. And I'm just wondering if you can share with us your thoughts about what it's like to experience that dehumanization, what you think the best tools are to combat dehumanization.
Yeah, there are so many levels to that. But one thing that is increasingly frustrating, and it might not be a direct answer to your question, but that I think about, and the need to address how they justify, or the people that may feel sorry or maybe sympathize with the Palestinians, but then turn around and blame it on Palestinians, right? Blame it on Hamas, because Israel is right. They're the moral army, the state that has committed the most atrocious, unspeakable, horrific things that I think any of us have ever seen or could have imagined, that they are infinitely and always better than the people fighting for their liberation. And the thing that is so then easy to accept is, yeah, Hamas hides in hospitals and uses their people as human shields. We were talking about this, that it's actually the Israeli military that uses human shields. And when you actually think about it, Gaza is such a small strip of land that is completely encaged. There's nowhere to go. So Palestinians are going to fight for their liberation. I mean, they're blamed if they dig tunnels, or they're blamed if they're out fighting in the open. So they're just not allowed to fight. It is Israel that is not distinguishing, that is dropping bombs on entire neighborhoods. We know these kind of media mouths and pundits, and certainly governmental representatives, a lot of them the spokespeople, have dehumanized Palestinians and gaslighting. And so that just rolls off their tongue. But also the conditioning that they've done to people that makes it so easy to believe is scary, and we need to combat it. And I was just saying this the other day, that I used to kind of look at the youth organizers, the student protesters, and sometimes think, well, maybe they should temper their language a little bit to get through to some people, maybe not actively support or chant for resistance. But today I'm like, no, actually, we need to change the way that people are thinking about this. Palestinians do have the right to resist. It is Israel that is, they are the terrorists, and students are being viciously attacked and persecuted for this. But the more, like, we have actually, I think, over the last year, I mean, because it is a genocide, but because I think we've broken that taboo about using these terms, we need to keep using them. We need to keep pressing about what's happening. No, it's not Hamas hiding civilians. You know, they dug underground tunnels. They are in a prison, a concentration, wherever. They are completely encaged. You're basically saying that they have absolutely no right to fight, and they accept their subjugation forever. And that's the only way that it'll be okay. This kind of reality, this kind of understanding needs to just be flipped on its head. And I think that we just need to confront it and talk about it a lot more. I think we've been hesitant to do so. And even myself, I noticed I've self-censored. Like, I don't want to be seen as, defending or a spokesperson or mouthpiece for Hamas. But that's not it. That's not what I'm doing by pointing out the fact that Palestinians do have a right to defend themselves. They have nowhere to go in Gaza, and that is the reality. And we need to ask ourselves why we accept this brutality and terrorism when it's carried out by a state, but people who are just fighting for their freedom are always the terrorists. And another thing that has been part of the dehumanization is always about how Palestinians kind of glorify death. Right, where we have seen nothing but Palestinians insistent on life. It is incredible. I don't understand it. I don't understand how they could be seeing what they're seeing and have never known a day of freedom in their whole lives. Like, when I landed as part of the Free Gaza movement with the boats in the port in Gaza and saw like how happy and welcoming all these Palestinians were, from young to old, welcoming people coming from countries that are complicit in Israel's attempt to annihilate them, and were so welcoming. How do you do that when all you've seen through your whole life is the brutality of Israel and the complete complicity, complacency, or complete ignoring of the international community, and yet you still are able to love, welcome, insist on life, and they're fighting so hard right now to live. So I have never seen a more poignant, deep expression of love for life, and that is the opposite of what we always hear about Palestinians, and we just have to keep working on changing that. I think Palestinians in Gaza, for the people that we can get, more and more people that we can get to pay attention, are teaching everyone an important lesson. We can't let Palestinians down. Like everything, I think that their fight to live, their fight to love, is a fight for all of us.
Doc Beer.
That we do know.
Folks, that has been another episode of the Palestine Pod. Thank you all so much for listening. Check out our full episodes and sources at www.palestinepod.com. Follow us on Instagram at The Palestine Pod. Send us an email at palestinepod@gmail.com. And please consider supporting us on Patreon, www.patreon.com/PalestinePod. That has been another episode of the pod. Thank you all so much for listening. Have as good a day as you can.
We can start telling people to join the Patreon. The show wouldn't be possible without a Patreon. You got to get on our Patreon. Support us on Patreon. You can, because like I've been watching all these other podcasts and they just keep plugging Patreon like all the time.
Yeah, I'm going to clip what you just did right now.
Okay.